Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier, and thank you for stopping by. And I apologise for yesterday, but I got stuck at the Securities Exchange for a function we were invited for 10 and it started at 12, and by the time I got out of there it was 1:30, so I couldn't manage the podcast. I apologise for that. I took this photograph yesterday from Kencom House of Nairobi, looking in a different direction to photographs I normally show you. I'll put that up, and I'll also put up a photograph of the Cabinet Secretary Aden Mohammed ringing the bell at yesterday's function. The next Mindspeak is this Saturday, the 13th of September. The guest is Manoj Changarampat. He's of Samsung East Africa, the Internet and Mobile Director, and a very interesting fellow if you're interested in looking at retail. This is the man to be speaking to in all things mobile, all things internet, and really I've had an opportunity to interact with him, and he's got a treasure trove of information in this really sort of fast-growing space. Mindspeak, of course, is held at the Intercontinental. There's a link for the description I gave on the day Madame Lagarde was our guest. I gave an explanation as to what Mindspeak was all about. We serve breakfast from 9:30. We start at 10. That's this Saturday. It's a free-to-attend forum. I'll put up a photograph of Manoj using his Samsung to time one of his fellows' presentations at a previous function, a link to the presentation he gave at the CIO breakfast, which was extremely interesting. And then the immediate predecessor of Manoj was, of course, Dennis McCory. If you haven't had a chance to listen to his Mindspeak session, please do. We've had some great guests: Lagarde, Titus Naikuni of Kenya Airways, Charles Ireland of EABL, Ceci Bear of the East African Community, Munir Ahmed, National Bank, Joshua Oigara, KCB, Dennis McCory, On Phone Media, and now looking forward to hosting Manoj. I'll put up the link for Lagarde's Mindspeak, where she really was a great guest. Macro thoughts go back to an article I wrote where I said picking up the signal through the noise of our world in 2014 is no easy thing. Home thoughts go back to T.S. Eliot, the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky. Like a patient etherized upon a table, let us go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights in one-night cheap hotels and sawdust restaurants with oyster shells. Streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent to lead you to an overwhelming question. Oh, do not ask, what is it? Let us go and make our visit. And indeed, I'm jumping now, there will be time to wonder, do I dare and do I dare? Time to turn back and descend the stair. With a bald spot in the middle of my hair, I had to deal with that at a much earlier age than I suspect T.S. Eliot did, going by the photographs. They will say how his hair is growing thin. My morning coat, my collar mounting firmly to the chin, my necktie rich and modest, but asserted by a simple pin. They will say, but how his arms and legs are thin. Do I dare disturb the universe? In a minute there is time for decisions and revisions, which a minute will reverse. I grow old, I shall wear the bottoms of my trousers rolled. Shall I part my hair behind? Do I dare eat a peach? I shall wear white flannel trousers and walk upon the beach. I've heard the mermaids singing each to each. I do not think they will sing to me. I have seen them riding seaward on the waves, combing the white hair of the waves blown back when the wind blows the water white and black. We have lingered in the chambers of the sea by seagulls wreathed with seaweed red and brown till human voices wake us and we drown. This is a fabulous poet, and sorry I'd forgotten how good that poem is. Political reflections: President Obama is preparing to expand an Islamic State offensive, including targeting the group's havens inside Syria. The administration is considering steps, including moves to block foreign fighters from entering Syria and Iraq. That's dependent on Turkey. I'm not sure Turkey will be that keen. Delivering more aid to moderate factions among Syrian rebels and expanding airstrikes to Islamic State targets in Syria. US already has stepped up aerial surveillance in Syria, which would be needed to provide the real-time intelligence necessary to conduct precise strikes. They know that Syria has to be a piece of the plan, said former House Intelligence Chairman Jane Harman. He's seriously considering all options. Obama will deliver a televised address to the nation today at 9 p.m. Washington time. I'll put up a photograph of him meeting with the House Speaker John Boehner in the Oval Office that I found via Bloomberg. And then Asia Times, always irreverent, says US pivots at the gates of hell. This is the article. I believe that President Obama tipped his hand as to the basic US strategy for dealing with Islamic State militants in Iraq and Syria when he stated that the US goal was to reduce IS to a manageable problem. Once the appalling implications of this apparent endorsement of a permanent presence for the transnational decapitation-happy caliphate sank in, his Vice President Joe Biden was sent out for damage control with the hyperbolic message that the US would pursue IS to the gates of hell. Cynically, and I'm afraid accurately, the US position might be characterized as Assad was beating the West and Gulf Cooperation Council in Syria, but the unnerving rise of IS has upset the chessboard. Now the US has an opportunity to go in, help set up the chessboard, rearrange the pieces in a more favorable configuration, and add a few pieces of its own. And I expect the prospect of sticking it to Assad was the deciding factor in White House deliberations as to the political advisability of dipping America's toe into the Middle East inferno once again. And that was the point I was making previously about the redirection risk for Bashar al-Assad. You let the Americans in and it's very easy for them to turn 90 degrees and take you out in the process. ISIS response: UK military is planning to set up new bases in the Middle East. You could see an infantry battalion based at Al-Minad being able to train alongside the Emirates. This is a defense source. Talking about drawing down troops from Afghanistan. The effect is that we are making a strategic adjustment, which is in my view quite sensible. However, Professor Clark said the bases would not be the large facilities seen in Afghanistan, saying they would instead be smart footprints. The report from the Dutch Safety Board about the crash, the MH17, on the 17th of July 2014 came out yesterday. It was a Boeing 777-200 operated by Malaysia Airlines, broke up in the air, and probably as the result of structural damage caused by a large number of high-energy objects that penetrated the aircraft from outside. In this report, they're saying it hasn't been possible to conduct a detailed study of the wreckage. However, the available images show that the pieces of wreckage were pierced in numerous places. The pattern of damage to the aircraft fuselage and the cockpit is consistent with that which may be expected from a large number of high-energy objects that penetrated the aircraft from outside. It's likely that this damage resulted in a loss of structural integrity of the aircraft, leading to an in-flight break-up. This also explains the abrupt end to the data registration on the recorders, the simultaneous loss of contact with air traffic control, and the aircraft's disappearance from radar. That's from that report. I'm just going to jump momentarily to Thomas Pynchon in Gravity's Rainbow, who says if they can get you asking the wrong questions, they don't have to worry about the answers. I'll put up an image of the M17 debris, and the question I think is now, we know it was penetrated by a large number of high-energy objects that penetrated the aircraft from outside, and we either believe it's a missile which as it got closer to its target, broke up into all these flechettes and created that pattern of damage, or The other theory is, which is not given much credence in the normal press, but it is getting some credence, is that the cockpit shows traces of shelling. And that's, you can see from the entry and the exit holes. Edge of a portion of the holes is bent inwards. Smaller holes, round and clean, showing the entry points most likely that of a 30mm caliber projectile, is one theory. In this regard, the GSH-30T firing gun, operated by an Su-25, is able to fire 3,000 rounds per minute, which explains the numerous entries and exit holes. According to the findings of Peter Hysenko, if we now consider the armament of a typical Su-25, we learn this: it is equipped with a double-barreled 30mm gun type GSH-302A017A, equipped with a 250-round magazine of anti-tank incendiary cells and splinter explosive shells, arranged in alternating order. The cockpit of the MH17 has evidently been fired at from both sides. The entry and exit holes are found on the same fragment of its cockpit segment. And therefore, that's the choice, I think. Whether it was a Russian sort of promoted missile which exploded to cause maximum damage before it struck the plane, or this other theory. It was His Excellency Johann Borgstam who told me the signal announcing this new arrhythmic normal about which Henry Kissinger has written was the disappearance of the MH370. I wrote a piece over the weekend, The Decapitation of Godane, African Insurgencies in US Africa Command. And I said the timing of the assassination by Hellfire missiles in US Africa Command on the very same day that African heads of state were meeting in Nairobi to discuss ways of boosting domestic efforts and international support to combat insurgencies was an important signal in the noise. The meeting was expected to see leaders agree on concrete steps to enhance existing measures to effectively address the threat of terrorism, the African Union said in a statement. And of course, one of the key terrorist threats is decapitated on the same day. The timing of it was, of course, what I was referring to. And I concluded by saying the insurgency tail risk remains, and how it plays out will have important consequences for ourselves and the entire Africa Rising narrative. Somali militants are threatening US attacks to avenge their leader's death. That's the death of Godane, the decapitation. Let our Mujahideen fighters wait for good news, and let Obama wait for shocking news, senior al-Shabaab official Shongole said in a recorded message promising to avenge the death of Ahmed Godane in a US raid on September the 1st. Shongole's message was released over the internet, threatened further attacks in Kenya and Uganda. As you have killed Godane, many Americans will be killed in New York and Washington. This is real. Men have already been prepared, he added. So they're not taking it lying down. China deploys troops to UN force to protect South Sudan oil fields. This is the Wall Street Journal, where it's, of course, a subscriber model. So I'm reading it through Reuters. It deployed 700 soldiers to a UN peacekeeping force in South Sudan to protect oil fields and Chinese workers. Newspaper quoted a spokesman for South Sudan's president as saying on Tuesday that the airlift of a Chinese infantry battalion to the South Sudanese states of Unity and Upper Nile was expected to take several days. China is the biggest investor in South Sudan's oil industry. This would be the first time China had contributed a battalion to a UN peacekeeping mission. And of course, China is playing an unusually active diplomatic role in South Sudan. Under the mandate, UN peacekeepers are allowed to use all necessary means to protect civilians at oil installations. If attacked, the Chinese soldiers are combat ready and can fight back, the South Sudan presidential spokesman Atani Wek Atani said. Around 5% of China's oil imports came from South Sudan when it was pumping at full tilt. I'll put up a photograph of the river now, seen from the banks of the river in Juba. Susan Rice met with Xi Jinping on a 3-day visit to Beijing. She told senior Chinese officials that China must halt the dangerous intercepts General Changlong, the vice chairman of China's Central Military Commission, called on the United States to reduce and ultimately cease naval and aerial reconnaissance activities near China. So not much agreement there. Coming to the currency markets, the euro bounced a little bit. It's back above 129 at 129.24. Dollar index 84.23. Japanese yen 106.44. This is the strongest level for the dollar since October 1st, 2008. Swiss franc 0.9341. Pound 161.13. Little bit of a bounce. Aussie 0.9165. That's fallen sharply. India rupee 60.85. South Korean won 1034.64. That slipped sharply. Rial 228.61. Egyptian pound 715.22. And the big drop was the South African rand, just shy of the 11 level last time I had a look. The dollar has jumped 3.9% in the past 3 months. The yen has fallen 0.3% and the euro has weakened 1.3%. I'll put up a 3-month chart of the dollar index. And as I've said before, I think this is a congestion zone. We're still in a bull trend, but I can see us drifting a little bit around below 84.73. We touched 84.753, and a break of that level would take us to highs not seen since mid-2010. US Treasury yields have moved up, with the 2-year within sight of a 3-year peak of 0.59% set in late July. As I wrote previously, in the old days, these conditions would have created a flight into the dollar. I wrote that on the 25th of August. I thought that was a pretty good signal. I think, the dollar's going to continue to soar. Euro dollar 129.24, a little bit of a bounce. I'll put up a 3-month chart. Sterling also a little bit of a bounce, but it's been a very steep drop. We're last trading 161.15. The Prime Minister, David Cameron, is begging the Scots, don't rip our UK family apart in independence vote. We do not want this family of nations to be ripped apart, Cameron said. The United Kingdom is a precious and special country. But he gave a clear warning: if the UK breaks apart, it breaks apart forever, he said. And I learned from a very reliable source that Tony Blair feels that Cameron should have turned really negative a lot earlier. Gold was last at 1257.40, 1240 target, which I had from a while back, is not too far away now. Crude oil $92.83 was still down here, lowest price since January the 14th. Prices are down 5.7% this year, but I think we're trying to find a floor here. Ebola is threatening the very existence of Liberia as the killer virus spreads like wildfire, the defense minister warned. After predicting an exponential increase in infections across West Africa, the WHO warned that Liberia, which has accounted for half of all fatalities, could initially only hope to slow the contagion, not stop it. Liberia is facing a serious threat to its national existence. This is the Defense Minister, Brownie Samukai. The disease is now spreading like wildfire, devouring everything in its path, he said. And on the 18th of August, I said viruses exhibit non-linear and exponential characteristics, and Ebola is beginning to exhibit that now. If you didn't see that inside story about Ebola, do have a look at that. Interesting piece post in Beyond BRICS saying Africa's time is now for hesitant US corporates, and then quoting GE's chairman and CEO Jeff Immelt, who said growth in Africa is real, is happening now. In order to play, you have to show up. I agree with that. FT has got a piece about Africa's bond rush, asking, is it too risky? Clearly, we've had a lot of issuance. In the scheme of things, it's not that big, but in terms of Africa, it's pretty material. And in some respects, Ghana is the canary in the coal mines, where government loses discipline and allows the recurrent expenditure to spill out of control. But now they're called in the IMF. The Ghana Eurobond has been performing, and I think over the medium term, we're going to see stabilization there. South African all shares up 11.7844% in 2014. It's below the 52,000 level. Dollar rand, we're in a key area right now, bottom of the trading range. We break out of here, I'll put up a 6-month chart. We could be at 11.50 or somewhere around there. Dropped 1.2%, worst on a closing basis since Feb 20, biggest decline among 16 major currencies tracked by Bloomberg. Second quarter was a complete nightmare. Gap on the current account increased to 6.2% of GDP in the second quarter. So a sort of storm of bad news there, and a very strong dollar. And, the rand is the proxy for risk globally. People just sell the rand when they think the markets are, looking as if the risk is off. Egypt pound, we're still at that level of 7.15. Egyptian stock market fell 1.06% yesterday, but bear in mind it's up even after that fall, 41.55% this year and at multi-year highs. Nigerian all shares negative 1.115% this year. It's at 3.5-month lows. Ghana Stock Exchange up 2.65% this year, but at 8-month lows. Coming to Kenya, Bensouda explained, "I haven't dropped the case. The judges asked me a question. Are you in a position to proceed?" I have responded on Friday that I am not in a position to proceed because my evidence to prove guilt beyond reasonable doubt is not there at this stage. She also decried criticism that the ICC is anti-African. This criticism is totally not backed by facts, she said. I wrote on the 19th of July last year, the case against the president is crumbling like a stale biscuit, and I think her comments are evident of that. City Lodge have bought out the remaining stake they didn't hold in Fairview for 1.88 billion shillings, making it a total consideration of 3 billion shillings. This is the Fairview and City Lodge. Shares in the Nairobi Securities Exchange surged about 71.5% yesterday. Katrina's written an interesting article. The shares had doubled at one point and eventually closed up. I think it was 73%. I'll double check. I said this is the type of price action you want. It's a very small bite-size IPO priced to clear, which is why we've had a nice pop and people got behind it, I said. It probably represents an open sesame moment, I added, meaning I expect more issues now to come to the market. All shares up about 120% over 3 years, I think this was a very positive development. It rallied 71.57% yesterday to close at 16.30. It's now trading at its daily limit, up another 10%. I'll put up a link because I took the camera guys with me when I went there yesterday and we filmed, and we'll publish a number of speeches, but the first two that we've edited is the CEO's speech, Peter Mwangi, and the Cabinet Secretary, Aden Mohammed, who spoke a few words and then delivered the President's speech. I'll also put up a photograph of Aden ringing the bell, and then a few tweets that I did. Cabinet Secretary Henry Rotich said he's launching a diaspora bond in short time. Najib Balala, the mining minister, says that we're making mining companies list 20% of the shares at the NSE. Kenya shilling 88.646. It really has been a Teflon shilling, as I wrote in July. It's held in there whilst the dollar is just pasting every other currency you care to name. It's confounding expectations, and it's done it before. It'll do it again. Nairobi all shares up 16.9557% this year, 0.262% below a record high set on the 3rd of this month. NSE 20 closed at fresh more than 6-year highs. That's up 5.214% in 2014. Katrina's written a great piece about armed cement coming through a mix of fortunes. I'm glad I was the introducing agent for her, and it tells the story of Mazay Pound-Rana, Pradeep's dad. It's really a fascinating story. When it was set up, the journey, the various travails, the listing took place, for example, on Saba Day. It's on rich wrap-ups, well worth having a read. Lots of very interesting comments, and a very, very interesting journey. The link for the share price is on the website. I took a selfie yesterday with my friend Kiprona Kitoni, who's the head of the Kenya Chamber of Commerce, and I'll post that. That was at the NSE function. BAT closed at a record 29 yesterday, served up a 43.75% return so far this year. Limuru tea rallied 10% to close at a record of 715. It's plus 43%. Tea prices have been soft, but Limuru tea sits right on the edge of Nairobi. Its tea estate is worth a bundle as real estate. And then finally, Kenya Orchards closed at a record and is now up a monster 700% this year, but of course on very low volume. And it's really, I think, the idea behind it is the valuation is so low, there's probably an arbitrage in using it as a takeover vehicle and then using it as because you have a cheap listing via that. Once again, thank you for stopping by. If you bought some shares in the NSE and you want to track it, just register on rich.co.ke. It's a very quick process. Make sure you get your password and then go to Rich Live. And then from Rich Live, you can check any share price at the NSE in trading hours, bid offers, supplied, everything you want to have a look at. So do that. And then the other thing to bear in mind is this Saturday. I hope you can make it to Mindspeak in Manoj. We serve breakfast from 9:30. And we kick off at 10 sharp. Thank you so much for stopping by.